Welcome to the Practical NLP Podcast with me, Andy Smith. Catch up on previous episodes at nlppod.com. This week, some more metaprograms, the content-free filters that determine what we pay attention to. In this episode, we're considering the general or specific, proactive or reactive, and internal or external frame of reference metaprograms. Remember, these are context-dependent. So for each metaprogram, you might lean towards one end of the spectrum in one context and have a different pattern in another context. And for a given context, you can be anywhere on the spectrum between the two extremes. First, general or specific, also known as chunk size filter or scope. The question here is, what level or chunk size of information are you comfortable with, the big picture or the details? This metaprogram is about which levels of the hierarchy of ideas the person is comfortable operating with. The person at the general end of the spectrum will think in terms of abstract concepts and generalizations rather than specific details. When faced with too much detail, they'll feel overwhelmed or bored. A person at the specific end of the spectrum will feel more comfortable with facts, details, and step-by-step sequences. Abstractions and the big picture on its own will feel vague and nebulous without more details and specific examples. Identifying the general or specific pattern. This pattern will come out in any general conversation. For example, you could ask the person what they're currently working on or how their day's been. The specific person's answer will be in the form of a step-by-step narrative with lots of specific detail. They'll use lots of qualifiers, adjectives and adverbs. If you interrupt them, they may start at the beginning again or else restart where they left off. The general or big picture person's answer will be shorter in the form of a summary. It may not be in a temporal sequence, but will aim to give you what the speaker sees as the most important aspects first. This may seem like a random order to the listener. Let's look at how this pattern plays out in terms of suitability for different job roles. Generally speaking, the higher level of abstraction a person can handle, the higher they can go in an organizational hierarchy. The upper ranks of the army are even called generals. The ability to think strategically, in other words, to be able to work with high levels of abstraction, is usually essential for high-level roles. Having said that, people need to be able to handle details to perform well at lower levels on their way up. A detail focus is needed for quality control, proofreading, health and safety, and bookkeeping. A big picture focus is needed for leadership and creative roles. Let's look at the implications for influencing and managing people. As with all the metaprograms, match where the person is on the spectrum in order to communicate with them. If you need a general person to be more specific or vice versa, start from where they are and use pacing and leading to help them move up or down the levels of abstraction. To communicate with the general or big picture person, give the big picture, the overview. Say the real issue is this. In a nutshell, it's that. Calibrate to notice if they're getting bored or overwhelmed with detail. For specific detail-focused people, use examples and sequences. First, this happens, then that happens, and so on. Give details. Use words like exactly, specifically, precisely. Calibrate to notice if they're looking lost or if what you're saying is going over their head. Proposals and reports often contain an executive summary for general readers and appendices with lots of detail and facts for specific readers. Now the proactive or reactive metaprogram, also known as the action filter or motivation level. Do you take the initiative and leap into action, or do you prefer to analyze and wait for others? Proactive people are self-starters and do not wait for others before they act. They're focused on achieving results. At the extreme, they can see other people just as tools to get things done, so they sometimes upset those other people. Reactive people won't act until they've analyzed the situation or until other people prod them into action. They want to make sure everything is right and perhaps reach a consensus before acting. Other people may get frustrated with their apparent inactivity. To identify the proactive or reactive pattern, this pattern will appear in the structure of the language people use and in their body language. People at the proactive end of the spectrum will tend to use short, direct sentences, often with a command tonality, on statements or even questions. They'll use active verbs and verb patterns indicating an at-cause mentality. They expect to be listened to. They have a need to act. Their body language is generally fast. Might be fidgety, pencil tapping, they won't sit still for long periods. You'll definitely notice this if you have a strongly proactive person in a meeting or a training course. People at the more reactive end of the spectrum will use passive verbs. They'll use lots of nominalizations, long sentences that tail off, verb patterns indicating an at-effect mentality. Things happen to them, others make them do things. Lots of modal operators of necessity. They'll use conditional words like might, could, would. They can have a question tonality on their statements, and they have a need to understand before they act. Their body language, they're able to sit still for long periods. They may seek lots of eye contact as if looking to others for approval or checking that they're being listened to. How does this pattern apply with different job roles? A proactive pattern is useful for salespeople, where they initiate outgoing sales, business owners and leaders. Proactive people need to be given things to do, otherwise they become bored. If you're recruiting for a role needing a proactive pattern, you can screen out reactives by requiring applicants to phone. The reactive applicants would never get round to it. Don't hire highly proactive people for jobs requiring diplomacy or where consequences need thinking through. A reactive pattern is useful for support desks, customer service, research and analysis, and jobs which include long periods of waiting around. Reactive people need time to get their heads around a decision or to check how others feel about it. Don't hire them for roles requiring snap decisions. Most job roles require a mixture of proactive and reactive. So how do you influence or manage the different ends of this pattern? For proactive people, use words about getting stuff done. Just, as in, just do it. Make it happen. Let's get on with it. Jump in, or you'll smash it. Or Richard Branson's motto, screw it, let's do it. Pace their belief that they make things happen. If you need to restrain them from jumping straight in, you can say, just before we... The just indicates that the delay will only be very short. Give proactive people ways to use their energy. If you're selling to them, give them a way of taking action or getting results straight away. If you have a strongly proactive person on a course or in a meeting, make sure the activities or meeting segments are short. Even one highly proactive person can disrupt things for others if they get bored and fidgety. For reactive people, use words about considering. As you consider, you could, we might, take as long as you need, circumstances are right, this is what you've been waiting for, everyone's doing it. Use Cialdini's social proof principle by giving examples of other people who've bought the product or are doing what you wanted them to do. If you want them to act, use wording that implies that they've had a period in which to consider and analyze. Now that you've had a chance to think about it, no need to wait any longer. Now the internal or external pattern, also known as frame of reference filter or motivation source. This is about how much feedback you consider you need. The internally referenced person has internal standards that they use to assess how well they're doing, regardless of what anyone else says. The externally referenced person actively needs feedback from others to stay motivated and confident that they're doing a good job. To identify the internal or external pattern, try this great interview question. Simply ask, how do you know when you're doing a good job? The strongly internally referenced people will say, I just know, or I feel it, my experience tells me, I decide. They'll refer to their own internal evidence. Strongly external people will say, my manager or my customers or my colleagues tell me I'm doing a good job. For people in between the two extremes, you'll get a mixture of the two answers, plus reference to objective external evidence like targets being hit. What job roles are these patterns good for? Internally referenced people are good in back office positions and those that require independent decision making, leadership roles, technical specialists, the professions, and creative artists. Externally referenced people are good in any frontline role, customer service, retail, travel, hospitality. Usually people become more internally referenced as they spend time in a role and build up a database of reference experiences to base their decision on. Ideally, a person in a new role or coming onto a training course such as an NLP practitioner course will start out externally referenced and gradually become more internally referenced over time. This enables them to take on information in the early stages and become confident in applying what they've learned as they become more experienced. To influence and manage these patterns, the internally referenced person, you can say, as you know, only you can decide, you may want to think about, this is just a suggestion, what do you want to have happen? To influence the externally referenced person, you can say things like, people are saying this, research shows, they're not happy, this is what you could do, I've noticed that, or the boss says, and that should do it. Externally motivated people need frequent feedback. If they don't get any from their boss, they will become apprehensive as the annual appraisal gets nearer, because they literally will not know how they've been doing. If you're a strongly internally referenced manager in charge of a strongly external person, do whatever it takes to remember to give them more feedback than you would require yourself. Externally referenced people may take information or inquiries about the current state of some task as an instruction to do something about it, even if that's not what the inquirer intended. Internally motivated people treat instructions from their manager as just more information. They'll act as and when they see fit. Ideally, you'll allow them to make their own decisions, or think they're making them, hence the use of influencing patterns such as only you can decide, having set out the facts to point to a particular decision, and as you know, before telling them something they don't know. Find out what motivates the internally referenced person and see that they get it. Feedback will not have that much impact on them. If you have a strongly internally referenced person on a training course, you may have to arrange an experience that demonstrates to them that they don't already know everything there is to know about what they're supposed to be learning. There's much more about these metaprograms and several others in Shelley Rose Charvet's very readable book, Words That Change Minds. There's a link to find it in the show notes for this episode at nlppod.com. That's it for this week's podcast. Remember, you can see the show notes for this episode at nlppod.com, and you can download back episodes you may have missed from the online store at webstore.nlppod.com. See you next time.